With its large amounts of optional systems and content, and high degree of player freedom, Terraria lends itself well to self-imposed challenge runs. But many challenges involve hours of searching for uncommon monsters or farming rare drops. Finding the most efficient way to farm is certainly part of the game, but at times it can feel like you're spending forever trapped in a box, just waiting to start playing again. So what if it actually was forever? What if you never got those items you wanted? Is the game still possible if you have atrocious luck? Well, of course it is, but is it still fun? I gave myself a simple challenge: beat the game without using any rare items. What counts as rare? Let's say anything with a drop rate of less than 100%. So because slimes have a 100% chance to drop gel, and trees have a 100% chance to drop wood, I can make torches. But because demon eyes only have a 33% chance to drop lenses, I can never craft anything which requires that item. I decided to play on Classic because I think this challenge should become difficult enough as is. Unknown to me, Classic mode comes with its own set of unique complications for this run. The beginning went as normal, except because no single item is guaranteed in these chests, I simply tossed their contents and used the empty boxes for storage. I'm fairly certain each tier of ore is present in every world, and life crystals supposedly generate in fixed quantities, so I gather each of them I can find. I'm not using mana stars though, because it seems to be theoretically possible to never have any spawn. Ridiculously unlikely to be sure, but it's not 100%. Defeating the eye is simple enough, but the Eater poses a problem. No enemy or object has a guaranteed bomb drop, meaning the demolitionist will never arrive. Luckily, beating the eye and creating some shoddy houses allows the Dryad to sell us some purification powder to render the Ebonstone breakable. The battle itself is laughably easy on Classic. To be clear, I didn't make any mods, so I won't reset just because I pick up some random heart drops. I'll just be avoiding using actual consumables or equipables that aren't guaranteed. Anyway, we've beaten the Eater, but then a new hurdle arises. Each segment of the worm has a chance to drop Demonite ore, Shadow Scales, or both. But apart from 20 guaranteed ores for defeating the boss, it's only that, a chance. This means that, if they're truly colossally unlucky, a player could break every Shadow Orb and defeat the Eater of Worlds multiple times, yet never obtain enough Shadow Scales to craft anything. Rules being rules, I discard all but the bare minimum possible rewards. This is only a minor setback for now, as it prevents us from upgrading to Shadow Armor, but it will become very, very troublesome later on. Eater of Worlds gave enough money for a squirrel hook, the only guaranteed hook we can get, and allows the arms dealer to sell unholy arrows for our new demon bow. I would have preferred a tendon bow, but I guess we're just unlucky. My current target, Queen Bee, an important boss because we only have a limited number of attempts. I take the time to hollow out an arena, but then I find a second hive and decide to try it out, just to see how it goes. I just barely eke out a victory, netting a guaranteed 16 wax, just enough for a hornet staff. This is the only summon we get until endgame, as all the other options are based on chance. Thanks to the Witch Doctor and the dungeon, we can increase our bees. Unfortunately, although they're guaranteed on expert mode, bones have a measly 98.07% drop chance on Classic, so we can't rely on those. Meteorites are also random. We're about as prepared as we can be to fight the Wall of Flesh. Now normally to summon the Wall of Flesh, you throw a guide voodoo doll into the lava, but the demon that drops the doll is a rare enemy. So what do? We kill him ourselves. Between our army of bees and unholy archery, the boss is surprisingly easy. With that, we've entered the second half of the game, and the point where we learn how hard mode gets its name. Hello, me from the future, with a rule I forgot to mention, though you may have noticed earlier. I will be allowing myself to specifically fight randomly spawning bosses, since otherwise it would be literally impossible to progress from here. It's Terraria, but I never get the items I want. Not Terraria, but I never get the bosses I want. That's all. Typically, before fighting the next bosses, you want to gather the next 3 sets of ores, Cobalt, Mithril, and Adamantite. But because we didn't obtain any Shadow Scales, we couldn't craft a Nightmare pickaxe, meaning we can't obtain a Molten pickaxe, meaning we can't obtain a Mithril anvil. This prevents us from creating just about any items from the second half of the game. In other words, we're still using equipment from the first boss. I grabbed the next 3 boss summoning items. I'll still only use a random one each night, so this just saves me a bunch of waiting. I get Skeletron Prime, and frankly, it's not even a fight. I'm woefully lacking in all areas: offense, defense, and mobility. I make some stronger bullets for the rematch, but it barely goes any better. There was almost nothing I could do. The next boss I got was Destroyer. With a very basic strategy, it's possible to avoid most of the damage from this boss. I was actually surviving, but then I ran out of time. I wasn't playing perfectly, to be sure, but I couldn't even take off 1/4 of its HP before it despawned. The twins also decided to show up while I was preparing. Using a new strategy I came up with, which I'll explain later, I lasted long enough to bring one of them down to 1/2 health, but barely damaged the other by the time morning came. No amount of tactics would change the fact that my equipment simply can't deal enough damage to defeat these bosses within the time limit. So is that it? Was my simulated luck truly so bad that the game had become unbeatable? I don't think so. I do have one idea which can more than triple our damage output, but to explain, we'll need to talk about... It's nothing too complex, actually. By transferring ourselves to an expert world, we can defeat the bosses there and obtain their guaranteed expert drops, then move back to our primary world to use them. We're still pretty undergeared, so this is by no means a walk in the cake, but by exploiting worm enemy movement once again, we can defeat the expert eater of worlds, obtaining a treasure bag. Not only does this bag contain the worm scarf, an extremely helpful item, but it also always contains at least 10 shadow scales. This means that finally, we can go back through the underground, mining hellstone, cobalt, mithril, and adamantite. Using proper hard mode equipment, we can effectively trade blows with the expert eye and skill. We can expand our arena, defeat the eye, then use the shield of Cthulhu to evade Skeletron. Well, I'll come back to that later. For now, we have most of what we need to begin preparing for the next part of the plan. We should have enough firepower to finish the mechanical bosses in time, and the defense to take a few hits, but we definitely can't afford to trade blows. Our mobility is still next to nothing, meaning Skeletron Prime and the twins will very easily stun lock us into death, as we saw with Expert Skeletron. But there is a solution for this as well. The Hoik. See, normally if you stand inside a sloped tile, the game tries to push you onto a solid surface. But if that solid surface is another slope, you get a Hoik. I create an arena using Hoiks, and then the twins decide to interrupt me as I'm attempting to keep the corruption away from my sad excuse for a town. I'm totally unprepared, with no food, no bewitching table, and not even a heart lantern, but I give it my best go, just to see how well I hold up. Getting knocked back is rough, but it turns out the shield we obtained from Expert Eye lets us mount the Hoik from anywhere in the arena. Using this newfound mobility, and my greatly increased damage, I destroy Spasmatasm. The clock is ticking down, and Retinator is almost at full, but I focus my fire, risking those few extra hits before moving off to heal. Finally, I've beaten my first mechanical boss. Remember, the summon items for these metallic monstrosities require Souls of Night, a 20% drop from underground enemies, so we can only beat each boss once. They won't drop enough hallowed bars to create a full set of armour, so I choose to prioritise a new weapon and the next mining tool. Compared to my first times fighting the mechanical bosses, my DPS has more than quadrupled. This might theoretically be enough for Destroyer, but it would need a perfect fight. I'm not a perfect player, so I decide to get one last upgrade to amp up our damage output. Is it the Mega Shark? Nope, too rare. Is it Reforging, or Tavern Keep Sentries? Nope, those are rare creatures too. The answer is Glitter and Sparkles. Holy arrows happen to be made of unicorn horns and pixie dust, two of the only items which have a 100% drop rate from common enemies. Because we keep Destroyer near the ground, we can't make full use of Unholy Arrow's piercing, so Holy Arrows will provide more reliable damage. As luck would have it, I take on Destroyer next. It comes closer than I'd like, but I finish it off with arrows to spare. I go back and get revenge on Expert Skeletron. And finally, against Skeletron Prime, I can make full use of both my improved equipment and improved fighting skill. Now that the mechanical bosses are through, we're most of the way done. We just have 2 jungle-themed bosses, and then the rival battle and Elite Four. I first try fighting Plantera in a regular arena. Her first phase feels rather doable, but the jetpack we bought after the twins is too slow for her second phase. I could hoik, but I would need to study Plantera's movement and projectiles to figure out the spacing. I think I have a simpler solution. I dig a wide shaft through the jungle and put a rope down the centre. The jetpack lets us ascend fairly quickly, but without other items it's quite slow horizontally. This arena should let us stay away from Plantera in a way that better suits our gear. I come close to winning. This idea has potential. Using the final spawner I found, I try again. The arena has some slight improvements, but my real strategy is to simply suck less. I do, but only slightly. The first time you defeat Plantera, you get 2 important items at a 100% rate, a temple key and our new weapon, the grenade lawn. Maybe not. But now that we have a launcher of some kind, we can buy a mine launcher. My heart was still racing from Plantera, but I went straight to the temple. Luckily, the chests each contain 1 guaranteed power cell to bring life to the next boss, Golem. I set some mines around the arena and eat a marshmallow, the only food we can purchase. The battle begins slowly, but once he powers up, things become rather frantic. Somehow, the Shield of Cthulhu, Marshmallow buff, and small bonus from our leg armour combine to give me just barely enough agility to graze past his attacks. Just as I'm thinking I have a chance to beat him on my first try, he corners me for multiple quick strikes. I'm 1 hit away from dying when I bring his HP towards the triple digits. But I pull through. Those of you familiar with Terraria, yes, I barely beat Golem. That should tell you both that this challenge is at least somewhat difficult, and also that I'm very bad at the game. There are only 2 more items we can get that will help with the last few fights: Glitter's Celebration Launcher, and Zelda's new invention, an improvement over our current common unenchanted jetpack. I guess the Witch Doctor also sells an upgrade for an accessory we have, but our bees are already dealing so little damage against our current enemies that I'm not sure it'll even help. I approach the cultists to begin the final series of fights. Armies of goblins and pirates try to stop my attempts, but as I get used to both his attacks and mine, it's only a matter of time before the cult leader goes down. I'm immediately accosted by powerful aliens with shotguns. The 4 pillars are quite painful when under-equipped, but progress is kept even after death, so we can chip away at them a little at a time. I die 17 times on the Vortex pillar, 17 times on the Nebula pillar, 4 times on the Stardust pillar, and 6 times on the Solar pillar. With all the pillars down, impending doom approaches. But we can just exit the world and rejoin, and Moonlord won't spawn. This is important, because we can't actually make the lunar weapons yet. Each pillar drops between 12 and 60 fragments. 1 weapon costs 18. Any typical player would almost certainly get enough to craft at least 1 lunar weapon, but we're not typical. So we do that all over again. But once we beat the Vortex pillar, things change. We now have 24 fragments, so it's time to make our last preparations. The Vortex Beater is an incredibly powerful gun, but it's also very inaccurate. But chlorophyte bullets can home in on enemies almost perfectly. Now that we have enough vortex fragments, all that's left is to use them to make the weapon, then craft thousands of bullets with all the chlorophyte we've been gathering. Hey, don't blame me, I'm an elf, I had to go with the bow. Besides which, I decided a while ago not to use chlorophyte, because the way it grows seems like it's based on chance. The wiki doesn't say anything on the matter, but just to be certain, I've been intentionally using my other, weaker options. This is fine though, as the bow won't actually be our primary weapon. While visiting the Witch Doctor earlier, I purchased a set of Tiki armor. Despite having lower defense, lower speed, and lower direct damage, this is technically the highest tier armor we can get, as it greatly improves our summoning ability. So we're going to lean into it by making our primary weapon the Stardust Dragon. We even unequip the Expert Skeletron Hand to make room for both our summon accessories at the same time. I iron out some improvements to the arena, taking into account our wings and the Moonlord's multiple hitboxes, and craft as many super potions as I can. Finally, I defeat the 4th pillar, and impending doom approaches once again, but this time I'm ready. I think. The moment he spawns, I begin loosing arrows at his central eye. I miss the timing on his phantasmal death ray and take a huge hit, but the nurse doesn't seem to be there. In a panic, I leave to quickly check the map. Thankfully, she appears to provide some truly essential healing. The boss immediately teleports to my side though, leaving not a second to rest. I mostly focus on dodging, but between my somewhat average mobility and the map's small size, we continue to exchange hits which I'd really rather avoid. The battlefield grows more chaotic as my dragon takes down each eye, with a little bit of support from my literal rain of arrows. As long as I don't take too many hits while hoiking to the nurse. I can actually do it! I bring our astral adversary down to just a sliver of HP, but in trying to dodge a laser, I end up cornered at the top of the map. His ring of eyes juggles me for repeated hits, and with no chance of escape, my only choice is to unload on his heart and hope. With just 11 HP to my name, I deliver the finishing blow, and so end this journey. And there you have it, Terraria, beaten with only items every player is guaranteed to be able to get. So, to answer the questions from before, is it possible? Absolutely. Is it fun? Things are made much easier if you farm a whole bunch of money, and I'm not sure if that's better or worse than looking for rare drops. I was forced to use some items I don't normally bother with, and the last few battles were just challenging enough that I felt like I could succeed with just a little strategy and practice. There's a lot to this game besides rushing through the bosses, but sometimes it's nice to just go punch out Cthulhu. Wait, crap, I forgot to remove the gnome. That probably invalidates this whole run, doesn't it? I hope you found this video mildly entertaining. If you want to watch more Terraria content, then sorry, you should go watch someone else. This was a one-off, so I recommend against subscribing. But if you left a nice rating or comment, it would give me the happy brain chemicals.